Welcome to Every Step podcast. I'm Krystyna Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
Hey, Krystyna.
Hey, Judith. Good to be back.
Oh my God. Krystyna, I've got so much stuff that's doing my head in now. I don't even know where to start. It is like, and like I said, it's good coming on this because I dump it and then I forget about it. I purge it and then I go on. And it's so I'm going to start today with the first number one thing that's doing my head in, and that is those Melbourne protests that are happening today. And for the audience, there's a big protest that's been going on in Melbourne.
And other parts of Australia, but yeah, Melbourne's been the worst.
Melbourne's been the worst because there's they're having a conference on weaponry, and so there's all the protests. And now it's not about the topic as much about what's happening and what's been happening.
Behavior.
The behavior of these protesters, and we're all for people who want to protest peacefully, but the behavior of these protesters has been disgraceful, and they've been throwing things. I watched it all yesterday, and it's happening again today. And they were throwing rocks and manure and acid.
I can't believe they were throwing acid. That was what shocked me the most. I mean, you don't come to a peaceful protest prepared with acid. I mean, okay, you see a bit of dung on the ground, you know, you're in the moment and you pick up the horse dung because there were police on horseback. I kind of get how that might have happened. But acid, that's premeditated. You had to bring that to the rally.
At anything, picking up it. And the reality is that it's so hypocritical because they're there protesting no war, no violence, and so it does not do the cause any good because people who are watching it are going, these are extreme left-wing activists, thugs. And I feel so sorry for the police who, deserve respect. They're out there trying to, and then not to mention the disruption of the whole of Melbourne, people not being able to get to work, to school, to everything else. And here's the clincher. If you ask half those people what they're there for, half of them don't even know what they're, they don't know the facts. Like, they try to ask people, well, tell us what why you're angry. And then they'll go on because we don't want war or what, but they won't go into the detail.
Well, a lot of them were carrying particular political flags and those sorts of things. So they were making it about something else, not about protesting about the fact that there was a weapons conference.
Exactly. And it just goes down to where's the respect these days? If you're going to protest peacefully. That's how you get your cause out there. And you get where people will listen to you. They're going to tune out when you're violent like that. And then the other thing that does my head in, then you get the Greens that come in on the speakers and say, we need to reevaluate the way that the police are treating people. And I'm like, did you see the video? The police didn't do anything. The police didn't pick up the rocks or the manure. Why do you have to evaluate the way these poor policemen, they were actually taking a lot on before they even arrested people. Yeah. And they were burning stuff, and it was just horrible. It really did my head in. I thought we're
seeing a lot of that around the world. It's not just here in Australia. There seems to be a lot of violent protesting, and there's this constant division everywhere I look. There's divisiveness. Divisiveness, pitching one against the other, pitching a religion against a religion, a government against a government, a leader against a leader.
Where's the moral compass?
So much divisiveness.
Where's the moral compass? How are we teaching the young kids about what right and wrong and what's the moral compass? And it goes to what we were talking about before we got on air. And that's where, do you remember the story about Anna Sorokin Delvey? It was on Netflix called Inventing Anna.
Yeah, I remember that series.
Remember that? We did an episode last year on it. And she's a fraudster, a con artist. She conned all these people out in New York. She's currently on home detention arrest. But guess what? In America, they're having her on Dancing with the Stars. Now, what kind of message does that send people thinking, oh, I can con people, I can be a fraudster. As long I go on social media and I might get a gig on Dancing with, and
Yeah,
she's
or you might become the president of the United States. I mean, isn't it a requirement to be a con artist, a criminal, and a fraudster? I mean,
okay, well, yeah, well, that's another topic in its own. But the thing is, she's going to be on Dancing with the Stars with an ankle bracelet on.
yeah, role modeling. Where's the role?
Role
Where's the role
modeling, where
modeling?
is that? So with
Yeah.
that one, and then the other thing that's done my head is in Victoria, librarians, they've been asked to ask children as young as 5 what their preferred pronouns are. Now, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that does my head in.
I am so sick of these pronouns. I am like, I don't need to know your pronoun. Just tell me your name. And all the, you see it on LinkedIn. Everybody's got their pronoun because they've all bought into the social
I
contagion.
just can't believe it. Like, so a librarian has to walk up to a young person and say, "Hello, what's your name? Are you a girl or a boy? Or are
Ex-
you another? Or are you a cat? Or are you a unicorn? Or are you like where? Why can't they just say, "Hey, what's your name? Oh, my name is
Uh,
Peter. Oh, hi, Peter. Come on
Hi,
in."
Peter. Why not just his name? Well, this mom of 3, her name's Montana Older. She took to TikTok and it went viral. And she came out slamming that, saying basically the world has gone mad, but we already
It's
know
gone
that.
mad.
And what the hell is the public libraries in Victoria is now asking kids how they identify? She goes, if this starts bleeding into kinders and schools, we're homeschooling. And I think a lot of young mothers are wondering where they're going to send their kids, where they're not going to get ideology forced down their throats instead of just learning math, science, what they're supposed to be learning.
Oh,
So she got a lot of support through that. There's so much stuff going on, but why don't we bring in our guest
let's bring
and
in.
ask, because I'd love to actually ask, our guest is Gary Bennett, and he is CEO of North Star Consulting. For those of you that are listening, we had Gary on our
Gary's a good friend of the show.
a good friend of ours, and
Yeah.
he full disclosure, I interviewed Gary years and years and years and years ago for one of his first executive level roles. And I have a comment about that, Gary, as it relates to the debate yesterday.
Mm.
But anyway, welcome and thanks for coming. Gary's joining us from Bali today. Gary, what's doing your head in?
Thank you. Like it's interesting listening to the opening. And sorry, good morning, ladies. Yes, I'm in Bali. Yes, thank you for that wonderful opportunity that you started me off many years ago on a great journey. Listening to the conversation this morning, it's just fascinating. And what you try and do, whether it's generational, whether it's history, whether it's education, I'm not sure, but it's almost as though we're living in this strange and horrible time. Now, I
Yeah.
want to be grateful for all the things that I have, and I see and live in a world. And guys, you know that I sort of sit across half a dozen different time zones on any different day of the week. Like I'm involved with lots of businesses and startups, all sorts of places. And I keep hearing this. So it's not like, I hear the sadness of the protests in Australia yesterday. In actual fact, I read the Sydney Morning Herald every morning as one of the first things I do. And I saw this and I thought, this is crazy. I look at the sort of debate that's taking place in the United States at the moment in reference
Oh,
to politics and the divisiveness. Is this generational? Is this history? Is this the stars not aligning in the right way and it's something that we're missing? Is it
yeah.
the fact that no one understands history anymore? Like this, like even the dramatic changes that have happened in the UK over the last few years, politically, with the royalty, with politics, with Brexit. We're living in this really uncomfortable time. Like, and if that does my head in, and I think,
Yeah.
why have we spent? And I got trying to find the right words because I'm trying not to offend anybody, but at some stage you have to. Is it generational? Now, I'm a few years ahead of you guys, but we get this critique from many as baby boomers, and for some reason people think that it was easy for us. And I look at
Yeah.
TikTok as
Did we indulge our children? Because we're all parents,
yeah, yeah,
and did we give our children too much? And to your point about, is it a generational thing? Did we
yeah,
indulge them too much? And is this cyclical thing, where a lot of
yeah.
us didn't come from much? We all worked hard. Our parents were all depression or recession or war babies. And then they gave us the best they could, and we wanted to do better for our kids. So we gave them everything, like private
Yeah.
schools, you name it, international
Yeah.
holidays, the works. And are we now dealing with the consequences of that? Is it history? Is it cyclical?
Look, I think that's part of it. But this was a discussion or a debate that I used to have with my father years ago. Is it nurture or is it nature? And I think that there's some nurture, that we made it easy. But again, I full disclosure, I sat with a Balinese faith healer yesterday, and did some readings, and we talked about
A
um,
Manku?
yeah,
A Manku.
children. And now we have, I have, in my life, over two marriages of 140 years, four children, two that are one that's actually the youngest one, doing great stuff, working hard, a work ethic, a commitment, a passion. And Judith has met this girl, and she's really developed into quite an impressive executive in her space, really doing a fantastic job. A son who's involved in the optometry business with startup, really committed. And then others that sort of have an expectation that life needs to deal them something. So, I think if you generalize, I think we did, but we wanted to.
Yeah, we
And
did.
has that turned on us to the point where people now live in sound bites rather than the reality of the full knowledge of what took place? Like you mentioned this before, like kids protesting today, or even, so many things that you look at. You look at people who are asked a question about politics. Why do you like this leader, or why do you like that leader? And they have this much depth on why they like that person. Oh, he's got a nice red tie, or he's got a nice shiny shoe, or she's got lovely black hair, whatever, rather than this is what they do, stand for, have delivered. We have this sort of TikTok world that we live in.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's, if anything gets my head in, it's that. Like, I have another really great friend of mine who, like Judith, is an executive, or was an executive search consultant based in Hong Kong. She's a lady in her late 60s now. And we have this conversation about work from home. And she also shared a TikToker with me the other day who said, "What?" This kid in 60 seconds says, "Why do I need to work? I just made $7,500 this week with 60-second TikToks. So why do I need to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and clean my teeth and brush my hair and get the train and turn up on time, when I can just tell people that I'm a smart ass?"
Yeah.
Influencer, yeah.
But how long is the whole influencer thing going to last? How much longevity is that person going to have in their career? And that's...
Look,
well, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Look, it's, again, does it do my head in for that reason? Because at the moment, I can't see the implosion of that happening. If you look at social, at the lives of people, there are families who live on television, have made billions of dollars out of being those influencers. Now, everybody thinks that that's what they're going to do. They're not, and it's like everything. Not everybody's going to be successful. But what we are seeing is a vast amount of people who see that this is life, and it intrigues me. Like, again, arguing with a young generation person recently, they said, "But you had it easy." I said, "I worked two jobs.
Exactly.
I slept 4 hours a day. I'd get out of one job and get into a train and go to another one. It wasn't.
And our parents kicked us
easy.
out of our house at 18.
Yeah,
Like, we had to leave our house at 18. You're on your own. Go make it in the world.
We didn't have it easy.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
well, a lot of people say that maybe that the problem is that the generations coming up, instead of parenting, we're trying to be friends with our kids rather than being their parents. And so therefore, they're taking liberties and they're getting away with things, and they're not being, told they can't do anything, and they're given a lot of stuff, right? So they are given a lot.
I think social media's got a lot to answer for, though. I think social media is a big part of the problem and the pressure and the pressuring on parents.
Yeah, Krystyna, it's interesting because I think that in some respects social media is good. In particular, like I've enjoyed it because of my global nature, also from business to personal type stuff. But I think you're right, and I think that Judith's point is really interesting one to observe. And I've just got off a call with a startup before this one, and I actually took one of the founders to task about things, and I knew he got upset with me, because I don't think that anyone in his life had ever said, no, you shouldn't do it that way. This is the way you need to think about it. Now, I say this, I'm an investor. I'm employed. I'm engaged, not employed. I'm engaged as an advisor. You want my advice, like a parent who's done this for 45 years, I'm going to give it to you. But you're right. I think that what we've become is fearful of having those hard conversations with our children, and we've lost the courage to do that, whether it was because we didn't want to not have a friend or we didn't want to offend them, because maybe our parents were hard. Yeah,
absolutely. And you extend that to the example that you've just used. I think a lot of leaders are challenged to have difficult conversations with people because they're afraid of being accused of being a bully.
Yes,
and actually they just need to hear some cold hard facts about appropriate behavior and inappropriate behavior.
And Krystyna, in the world we live in, you've got to find the right way to do it. But there is a right way and a right time to do that. You just can't, in my view, you just can't let people wander on believing their own bullshit.
That's exactly right. It's kind of like you've got to go, okay, when someone asks your opinion, do you want my opinion, or do you really, or you just want to unload?
Yeah.
Because if you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. But I remember I used to say to clients when I first would take on a client, I'd say, if you want me to tell you what you want to hear, I'm not the person. If you want me to tell you, because you're actually paying me to be an advisor and a consultant, and I'm going to often tell you things you don't want to hear. And if you're okay with that, then we're good. We'll have a good relationship. But if you just want me to tell you what you want to hear, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Look, and Judith, the point you made, and I think you mentioned something earlier on about, the debate that took place yesterday in the United States. And I think that part of the challenge with one of those participants in that debate is that people have been terrified to tell that person the truth, that they feed. Sometimes they feed the wrong information, or it's like that. I think it was a telecom ad years ago, and the father said, "Well, in the time of Nazi Goring, son, this is what happened," and that rubbish that people invent in their own mind. All of those immigrants jumping over your fence and eating the family
eating all your dogs.
Yeah, like seriously, someone needs to challenge and say, if you're asking for an opinion rather than just supporting what you're doing, then there's a difference in that. Like, you want an opinion, I'm going to give it to you. So
I'm going to give it to you. No, just on that, because on that situation when I did watch that debate, and I watched the whole thing, then I went back and watched it again just to see if I was seeing what I was seeing. And not having a political view, because we don't need to, because we're in Australia, but just looking at it from the point of a business point of view. And as an executive search consultant, when I used to interview people, CEOs, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of CEOs over the year. The first question I always ask is, when you took on that role, what did it look like? And what does it look like today? Now, I know the good ones can go boom, 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 boom. They got facts, they got figures, they got vision. And the first question, so this is what I would say to anyone who's actually being asked these kind of questions, and is where I think Harris went wrong, is that her first question was, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? She totally went off the track. She started talking about about the fact that she came from the middle class, and
yeah.
it was a speech. It was a speech I've heard a million times.
Yeah.
Her narrative. So it was obviously coached, like she's been coached
Yeah.
very well.
Coached,
like whoever
yeah.
coached her very well, because she came across as very statesmanlike, and she did some good things. But she never answered one question. And then Trump, on the other hand, he got baited, and he took the bait, and he couldn't, like, so it was just hilarious. But it was kind of like if you are getting asked questions about your achievements, whether you're going for an interview or political thing, don't tell me what you're going to do if you've been in the job. Tell me what you did do, and how you did it, because that's what people want to hear.
But unfortunately, that's not what happened.
It didn't happen, and it has never happened.
Yeah.
It has never happened.
When has a politician ever done that? You know, it's like they're all bad at it.
Good ones do it. Good ones can do it. Anybody, my view is that anybody, whether you're a politician or you're an executive, if they've done the achievement,
you list it. Yeah.
They can list it in a New York Minute. I remember I used this one guy as an example years ago, who was like the best interviewer. And I actually ended up placing him like 3 times over 25 years in senior roles. And it's because he could rattle off his achievement. He was a quiet achiever. So he wasn't a bravado person.
Yeah.
He was a quiet achiever who could, just like you, Gary, who could rattle off exactly what you've done, how you did it. And I knew that he did it because he had the facts.
Facts, yeah.
Had the facts. He didn't have to go into this, la la land space. He had the facts. And that's what we're missing in.
Well, I think we're missing that. We're missing that, but I think there's a bigger issue here, and it ties into something that Gary was talking about a moment ago, which lies are pervasive. Where is the truth? Everyone seems to have made an art form of lying. And
there was
everywhere we turn, people are lying.
Yeah.
And we, the consumers, we, the average people, have to figure out what is the truth and what is not the truth. And it's exhausting.
And it's going to get worse because of deep fakes and things like that we're seeing now online, and where the faces, there was just a story on that this morning about.
That's the next big industry, I've got to tell you, is actually dealing with how to help everyday people differentiate between fact and fiction, lies and the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, look, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how we validate, AI from real, truth from fiction, because we seem to have, we're living in a time where people don't research, people don't spend time, people don't read. It's all 30-second sound bites. And I watched some of the pre-discussions at that yesterday, and people have a 30-second view of the world. You're absolutely right, Judith, and I think that this has been something that's good for me. You've got to validate performance by saying, and we did this, and this is how it was validated, and that's what took place. And you're right with yesterday, that she had a fantastic opportunity to say, we've done this, and this, and on that basis, we're going to continue to do this for the future, and that'll mean that you'll live in a better world than you lived yesterday. So, but you're right, we're living in a soundbite world. Like, and a couple of my startups are involved heavily with the AI process and doing things in a way. But when you look at some of the stuff that's happening, it is so inappropriate, incorrect, and dishonest. How do we get out of that? Like, are we simply repeating history? We're in a time where so much more can take place and should take place, but we have this society that's just not where it should be. And you're right, this personification of, if I tell a lie often enough, you'll believe it.
And that's what's happened in lots of places around the world. It's not just America.
No, it's not just the US. No,
it's happening in Russia. It's happening
it's happening in the Middle East.
Many countries.
Yeah.
Is it me, or is it worse now than? I mean, I don't remember it feeling this bad. Is it just me, or is this again history where all this kind of stuff happened? It just happened in a different way historically. And
yeah, Krystyna, look, and I say this, I'm a great researcher and I'm a great reader. And one of the things that I do every morning when I walk is I listen to lecture series. History has done this, but I think that, and we've done it over and over again. We don't, and I say this often, history for most people is what your grandmother told you. Like, people can't go any further back than that. One, because they don't read and won't read or research or understand. And we've done this before, but what is not happening is any activity around trying to change the way we either educate, inform, or experience people. It just doesn't happen. And I say we're all living in this 60-second world. And you can't, like, it's so difficult to teach people this.
And we're not teaching them research skills. We're not teaching them research skills, because now we've got ChatGPT and all the other AI bots that you just say, tell me what happened here, and they'll output everything for you. So where does that research skill that was taught to us when we went through school and university? It was all about learning the art of research, deductive thinking, and being able to articulate the thoughts or the message.
Two things, and articulate is a fantastic word. I think articulate is really important, but to validate where that research and information came from, not that it was from a TikToker or something that says you need to check the facts on this.
Now.
Everybody is a publisher. You know, you can write a book about your life by talking to AI for 10 minutes, and they'll give you a book. So I think it's worse, but I think that we're living in, and I've used this term often, we're living in an information age, and the information is massive, and how we digest that and use that in a way that makes sense for both this generation and the future is a challenge. Like, lots of books about AI and what potentially will happen. Like, we've been working with AI for the last 30 years in every type of fashion. It's just got to the point now where it's being used inappropriately for a whole range of different things, and particularly with nations where they're doing things, wars that are taking place. But when you look back in history, all this has happened before. Like,
information's been weaponized. World War II. You look at the whole
seriously
fascist movement.
Like, we all get incredibly upset about what happened with Germany and the Jewish community during the Second World War. But 15 years or 10 years before that, Russia annihilated 9 million people in the Ukraine. They just killed them. Nobody even talks about that, because that's sort of it's not promulgated in history as an issue. And what's happening is Russia doing exactly the same thing again in the Ukraine. Now, I think it's wrong. But again, people need to understand that this historically is what's happened, and all that's happening there is people are trying to recreate history or claw back where things were. Now, is that right? Is that wrong? You need to research it and make up your own mind about those things. So it's tough.
One of the things that don't make the media, like what we were talking about this last time, Krystyna, about, the girls in...
Did I lose you guys?
Oh.
I think I may have.
The girls in... We can still hear you.
Still hear me? Okay.
But the women in Algeria, was it Algeria, wasn't it, Krystyna?
Yes, I think it might have been.
Yes, that they, they've lost all their rights. They can't, they can't drive, they can't sing, they can't do, but I have not seen that story once on mainstream media. And why aren't they protesting that? Why aren't they out there protesting that? I just
and this is and mainstream media is the operative phrase. You've got most of the media is controlled, certainly in the UK, America, Australia, it's controlled by the one publishing entity. So if they don't want the messaging to come out, the messaging doesn't come out.
Exactly right. And I didn't know that Disney owned ABC.
I
didn't know that. So there's okay, what's happening there?
Look, and you're like, it's fascinating, because we watch, because of where we live, we watch and take on news from lots of places. We watch the ABC and CBS News from the US every night. Al Jazeera here in Bali in some of the hotels, you can only get Al Jazeera, which is really fascinating. But the limited information that they allow to flow is fascinating. Like, I can tell you what will be on the US news tonight: politics, weather, a feel-good story about some kid selling lemonade out in the front street, a little bit about a basketball player or a football player doing something crazy, and then the weather. And that's it. And it's always like there's a hurricane. Every day there's a hurricane, a snowstorm, or a heat wave.
Yeah.
And it gets 5 minutes every day. And you think, this isn't news.
Hamburgers,
this is
chips, and milkshake for the brain, right?
They actually
exactly. Yeah.
They actually don't get a variety of the news. I mean, the good thing about Australian news, and I know this might annoy people who are listening from other countries, but in Australia, at least with, like, for instance, with the mainstream media, when they have a politician on from the opposition, they'll have an opposition person and they'll have a current office. So that if they have the prime minister on, they'll have the opposition leader. And it's like a mini little debate on whatever topic. And it's fair. And it's like, okay, we're listening to both points. Get it out there so that you hear both points, because you can't do anything if you're only getting pushed one narrative all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Look, and it's fascinating. That's why you do have to oscillate between media outlets, some good, some bad, some indifferent, some crazy, some logical, because there is always, as you say, the ownership of media these days, which we tried to stop that years ago in Australia, of a consolidation in certain areas, hasn't happened that well. And it's dominated too by an editorial view that sits at the top that says, I'm left, I'm right, I'm centre, I'm whatever. And that's what we're going to push to our 29 million viewers tonight. They'll get that left wing or right wing story. It's fascinating. So and to do that is difficult. To say, I'm going to watch 3 different newscasts each day. Yeah. I'm going to do ABC, Sydney Morning Heralds. And I think that's probably, sort of where we started. There's not enough time for us to be informed, validating what's truth and what's not truth, and then being able to articulate, like the kids at the protest, why are you protesting? Well, I hate war. So do I, but I'm not going to throw acid on someone. Precisely. That's not doing the right thing. That's promulgating violence and weaponry in their own way. So
exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. And you do then wonder what the heck is being taught at school. And
It's a lot of responsibility on teachers if they have to start by asking what pronoun you'd like to use before they can get into the real stuff. I mean,
well, guys, that conversation that you had earlier on about pronouns and stuff in Australia, and again, I even more greatly empathise with school teachers in the United States, and I know we're an international audience, but the fact that they're now talking about arming school teachers to allow them to shoot shooters that want to come in and kill children. Like, why would anyone want to be a teacher? And will we evolve to the point where this becomes the way we educate people?
Yeah. Homeschooling online.
But without the physical interaction, without the social networking, without the ability to be in teams, all those sorts of things that we grew up with that helped develop our character, our personality, our style, our network, will that disappear because no one's going to want to be a teacher? Now, you're right. I hate to think what's being taught, because there is this divisive world of this is right and this is wrong, rather than this is the world and you need to make your own mind up about it. So it's getting tougher. And the fact, do you want to be a teacher on a fairly average salary and take the risk of...
Well, they're underpaid, overworked. The classrooms are way too big. Like the classroom, when we went to school, probably were 25 people in the classroom. And now they're like 90 to 100. And that is... they're huge in those in the non-private schools. They're huge. And people can't afford to send their kids to private schools. And that's where I think they fail. And really, the platform should have been, what are we going to do about education? Like, how are we doing it? But nobody in any country, even here, focus on education, because that's too far away. They only want to get those votes now and what voters are going to hear. They're not talking about what we need for the future.
No, it's all about power and satisfying their own needs.
Plus it's such short term, and I think this is another thing that probably does my head in. The short termness of politicians or politics in the world we live in. And I don't know whether it's a change that's required or whether there's a different way of incentivizing what happens with politicians and politics. It's always like you step in, you win an election, and then you start to try and win the next election rather than to do anything that's meaningful. Like if there are some benefits along the way, that's sort of like, a sideline rather than I want to get elected again in another 3 or 4 years' time. And that's dumb. Now, we talked before about, CEOs who perform and have a track record or able to articulate those sorts of things. Maybe there's a different way of having a longer term relationship with the people who govern our countries, that we choose to govern our countries, rather than us constantly trying to be, do we elect them again? Do we elect them again? It's a tough game. And I say, my reading, my history lessons, my lectures indicate that we continue to make the same mistakes, just in a different level of accessibility, either through information technology, literature, finance, whatever. It's but we keep doing the dumb things over and over again as a planet, and I don't know how we change that. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with the next generation, because if they end up having children and maybe there's a full circle that goes around and they go back to being
swings.
Yeah, they start talking. Well, we had the anniversary of September 11th, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the world was very scary after that. So, like, remember, we thought that, oh my God, what's going to happen? It really changed our sense of security and how we traveled and what was going to happen and the whole thing. And then I think about when I was a little kid, how we had bomb drills. We had to get under they did the drill. And I'm thinking, well, it's not the cycles are kind of,
similar.
They're kind of similar, but we're getting a little more extreme maybe in certain other areas. But the ideology and the other thing I was going to say, and you can change your gender now on your birth certificate.
In the state of Victoria, you can legally change your gender to be whatever it is, and and you get a new birth certificate. And there's nothing on the birth certificate that reflects your gender at birth or anything like that. It just says if you were John Smith and now you're Julie White, it just says Julie White, born on this date, a female.
See, that's happening in Perth and some of the other states it's going through too. Because there's some women groups that are going out, that are speaking up about this, because that affects having safe spaces. And I think on your birth certificate, first of all, they shouldn't change the little part that says what sex were you born?
Or
female. And if you identify, if your gender is female now, well, then it can say gender female. But my sex at birth was, and that's because that's a fact. That's a fact that happened at birth because of your chromosomes.
Look at
complicated. So
it really is. And it's like, to your other point, was it 9/11 that changed the way the world thought about itself and what we were doing, our inability to say no to certain things? Was it this incredible lockdown globally during COVID that forced people into sound bites of 60 seconds because they were on the screen all the time? Is it a generation where we weren't clear enough, I won't say hard enough, but clear enough with our children about what our expectations were, or what they could do and what they couldn't do, or not being courageous enough to say no from time to time? It's a really interesting time that we're living in, and you kind of hope there is an inflection point that we can move through that moves this to a more logical world. And logical is a tough way to describe things, because I think it's driven from a whole range of things. And I say we, Jill and I live in a world where we see from the most sophisticated, educated people to the most unsophisticated, uneducated, government-controlled people. And it's so vastly different. And governments have responsibility, education has a responsibility, we have a responsibility to try and take care of that. It's, do we want all of that, or do we just want to get a nice little villa in Bali and live on the beach and watch the sunrise every morning?
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, even that's not what it's cooked up to be.
It's not what it's cracked up to be.
It's not what having both of us own properties in Bali, so I know, Gary, whilst we love having it, and yes, it's all there's lots of other stuff that comes with that. So
I think the thing is that it is kind of, as the world turns, and I reckon the aliens haven't landed here because they look down and they go, what the hell? That's too screwed up down there.
Well, if they did land, Judith, they spent 60 seconds on TikTok and left really quickly.
Exactly right. They go, oh my God.
I think that's a wonderful place to end this very rich conversation. We've covered an enormous amount of territory, Gary. We really thank you for your time, for your insight, for your thoughtfulness. I believe we need much more of that, much more thoughtfulness, logical, rational conversations. Yes, we need to have heart and feelings, but there needs to be much more logical, rational in equal measure. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Gary.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.